Hello. Now we are going to talk about the iterating collections. So here we'll talk about how to create our own collections type, right? And again, in the last time we have seen that a sequence type support iterations by being able to access the element by index. That means if you are creating the iteration, then you can access the element by indexing, right? We have even seen that you can create your own custom type by implementing the getItem method, but there was some limitations. So the limitation was the item should be the numerically indexed and it cannot be used for unordered collection like a set. So if you are implementing the getItem method, only the sequence type method will be created, right? Now, if we think about the iterating over a collections, which is not a sequence type, we really need a way to kind of request the next element in our collections, right? And if we can do that, our like let's say that if we can create a collection type that help you to get the next element, you do not need the indexing. That means you do not need a type of method which gives you the indexed element, and this does not have to be in order, right? This is what the iterable is. In general, iterable object is something which you are able to iterate over it, right? There is not need to be in order. So all the elements should not be in order. So the indexing does not matter over there, right? So the iterable method provides a method to return the next element in the collection, right? This works well with the sequence type and the unordered collection both, right? So the order in which the next return the item from the unordered collection is, of course, we do not know because that is the unordered collection data type. So let's say that here we have the set. In the set we have the 5 element. If you take this in a loop, the element could be in any order. We can see that this is called unordered collection type. We cannot even use the indexing in this type of data. Here we can see that if we'll try to do the indexing, we'll get error. So we want to create a sequence type, or we want to create a collections type, right? Which have these facility as well. Now we'll talk about our next method. So most of the Python classes or of course all the container type of the classes have the next method. So instead of using getItem method, we can use the next method to get the next element from the collections. We will implement the next method later on, right? But first we want to create our own next method, and then what we see is, so here we are implementing our own next method. So let's create a square class. This is a container type. Now we have this initialize method. In this we have the next underscore method, which is different than the what next method we have in the Python, right? Here what we are doing is whatever the value we are taking the square of those values, storing it in a result, and then we are incrementing the I value by 1, and then this will return the result. So it's like every time when you create or every time when you call the next method, I will be incremented. First, the square of the previous I will be calculated, and then the I value will be incremented. This is what the method is. Let's run this. Here we have created the object. Now let's call the next method. We are getting 0, 1, 4, right? So we are getting the square of every value. Now, how do we restart this iteration from the beginning? If we have to restart this method, we cannot do that. We'll have to recreate the new instance of the square class, right? We do not have any reset button in this. So here, if you want to take the like calculate the square of first to 10, you will have to create a new object. like over here, and then we have to call the next method on that new object. So here we are calculating the square of first 10 value, right? So we even are able to iterate over the squares, but these square value is in the infinite mode. That means there is no control button over here, right? We do not have a kind of method to restart the or like restart from the beginning, and we do not have even the control of how many squares we want to calculate. We do not have that, right? So you can create the infinite value of squares over here. We can fix that by using the stop iteration. If the next method goes beyond some number of element, we can raise the stop iteration exceptions. And here we are also implementing the len method. Let's call this. Now this init method have changed. Now instead of just initializing the I value, we are also setting the length value, which will be passed during the object creation. And then in the next method, we check that if the I value goes beyond the length, we'll raise the stop iteration, otherwise we'll return the result. And then we also have the length method to calculate the total length of the square or the total length of the container, right? Now to create the object, we need to pass the length value. Here we have this. Now let's call the length method. We have the 3. We can call the next method. We'll get 0. In the next method, we gain 1. And again 4. If we'll again call the next method, we'll get error because now we have received, now we have got to the point where we'll raise the stop iterations because this will go beyond the 3. When we call this, we'll get the stop iteration. Now we can essentially loop over the collections in a very similar way. That's how we have implemented in the get item method, right? So here we are getting the object. This is this infinite loop, but again we have this in the stop iteration. If this goes beyond the certain value, like if this goes beyond the 5 element, it will stop the iteration and then will break the loop. Here you can see that. Now there are two issues here. The first is that the iterable, this sq object has been exhausted, right? And we cannot restart the iteration. So if we'll call this, we'll get error. We cannot restart the iteration over here. And the second thing is we can't use the for loop over here. If we'll use the for loop, we'll get error, right? So the get item method that we had used or implemented earlier, that we were able to implement this like if we'll kind of implement the same thing with the get item method, then we would have able to use this in a for loop, but here we cannot, right? Similar to the len function, we have the len method. The Python has the built-in next function which have the next method. So instead of creating our own next function or an own next method, right, we'll use the next method we have, which is available in the Python. So here, same code we have, but instead of the next underscore, now we are using the next method over here, right? All the codes are same, right? Now let's use this. Here we're creating the object. Now instead of next underscore, we can use the next method. Again, we have this stop iteration. Now we can also use the same code to kind of get the sequence of 5 element. All the values are score of this. So square of this 0 to 5 value. Here we have this. If we'll try to do the for loop, will I able to achieve the for loop? No. Still we have the issue. So Python still does not recognize the square is the iterable collections, right? And we do not have even the reset for the iterations, right? Now here you will notice that technically our square class could be as a sequence type, but here we are talking about in general sequence type, which can work with the ordered and the unordered both object, right? So here what we're trying to do is we are building a new container which generate a random number. Here for that we'll use a random module, and then we have implemented the random number class, right? We have the length, we are passing the minimum, the maximum range, and then in the number of requested. So this number of requested is kind of we are iterating, right? In the next method is being called, and then in the next method or as well, here we have implemented the rand integer method, so which will generate the random number between minimum and the maximum value. So this is the sequence class we have created, right? Now we can iterate over the instance. Here we have this. We can check the length. We can take the, here we are creating the loop, which we are calling the next method. Every time we can see that every time we have generated a random number, but we cannot use for loop still, and we do not have the restart method for this, right? So let's try to use for loop. No, we cannot use for loop still, right? In the next class, we'll try to fix these problems. Thank you very much.